Hello and welcome. What you're about to watch is a critical analysis of the entire series of Danny Fenton. Originally, I wanted to try and make this a weekly review type of thing, where I start posting in June, having built a whole bunch of the reviews up, and keeping a consistent weekly schedule until I had covered the entire series. As I progressed through this, I realized that this wasn't entirely practical, and the Danny Fenton reviews were starting to take up 95% of my free time, limiting my freedom in terms of the other reviews I've been wanting to make, as well as slowly chipping away at my passion in wanting to do so. So therefore, as of now, I have 3 reviews done, and I will post them on a weekly basis until I catch up, and then they will come as they come. I will still work on it in my free time. However, I have other reviews I want to be working on in the meantime as well, and therefore I kind of need to set this off a little bit towards the back burner. Not entirely, but it's going to be a little bit less on the priority list, as reviewing all 49 episodes is going to be a little bit of a task that I didn't originally anticipate. And stacking them up before my self-appointed deadline of June 20th isn't the most reliable of plans, as I've discovered. So in the effort of maintaining my passion for wanting to do this project, I will simply post them as is for now. So with that in mind, I will now allow past Will to take the wheel, and we will be diving into this series. I hope that you enjoy. And yeah, we should have a grand old time.
Hello all, and welcome to the first video of my analytical breakdown of the entire series of Danny Fenton. This is a project that has been in the works for a very long time, and I'm incredibly happy to finally start getting them out. This will be a weekly series posted every Saturday until I have covered every single episode from the series. There are 49 episodes of this, so yes, this will take almost a full year to entirely release. Through this journey, in my attempt to find a download of the series that doesn't have terrible video quality, I've found several dead links from 2007, several forums that were obvious fakes that probably would have wiped my hard drive, and a rather impressive fan-made animation of a female version of Danny. It had this comment on it: "She looks sexy and hot, sorry if I offend anyone." So there's that. Anyway, the main point of this is to look back at an older series I used to love as a child and see if it holds up against the nihilistic scrutiny I apply to media today. Danny Fenton was definitely a favorite of mine back in the day, and even though it has been said that you can't criticize cartoons unless you're a cartoonist, I'm going to do it anyway. Because even though Danny Fenton is one of my favorite superhero cartoons of all time, seconded only by Batman the Animated Series, it is not immune to criticism. And taking a position of refusing any criticism from someone based on whether or not they've created something similar is actually insane. It is how artists become stagnant instead of grow. The series of Danny Fenton opens with Jack Fenton stepping forward and giving a speech about ghost hunting to our 3 protagonists, Danny, Sam, and Tucker. The very first lines we hear from these characters are going to be our first impressions of them, and it gives us an idea of what we can expect from them going forward. Obviously, we have to take into consideration that this is a cartoon for children and young adults that is limited to the old 20-minute duration format, so there's going to be some shortcuts and some contrived lines here and there to get the point across. However, as an opener, this is actually fairly well done in terms of establishing who these people are and how they think. Jack is portrayed as an eager and well-meaning buffoon who is pursuing his dream of ghost hunting and wants to share that experience with his children and their friends, without actually taking into consideration about whether or not they actually care. While he's obviously meant to be a comic relief character who isn't exactly meant to be taken 100% seriously, there's definitely a depth that can be explored here. Danny's first line is him saying that he wants to be an astronaut instead of a ghost hunter. This is something that is occasionally referenced in passing future episodes, but never exactly expanded upon. It's not the best first line, but it serves the purpose of saying that Danny has other plans for his life, while at the same time contributing to the overall joke that nobody actually cares what Jack is saying. Sam's line is that ghosts are too mainstream and that she doesn't like them anymore, which sets her up as the go-against-the-norm type. As this is a cartoon from the early 2000s, they went with the whole goth aesthetic, as this was back when people still did that. While it isn't the main focal point of her character, it's definitely a prominent one, and it plays a part in her personality and the choices that she makes throughout the series. For better or for worse. Tucker's line is definitely the weakest of the three, and all it really gets across is that he has a massive ego. As time goes on, this is amended as he does grow to an extent, but at least in this episode, Tucker is the weakest of the three characters. His entire purpose is essentially to conflict with Sam, and he doesn't really offer anything in terms of character throughout the 20-minute span. His entire personality can be boiled down to, I love meat. And yeah, I know this is only the first episode, and the whole meat thing is meant to be a joke, but it kinda seemed like Tucker was getting left out of the personality department in favor of developing Danny and Sam. Well, develop, but we'll get to that. It's fine, though. It's not necessarily a bad thing, especially since there are plenty more episodes that have the potential to dig into his character more. The scene goes on to show us two generic ghosts emerging from the ghost portal who attack Sam and Tucker. Danny transforms off-screen and beats them up while Jack rambles on, completely unaware of his surroundings. It's okay in terms of a joke. Obviously, there's a level of suspension of disbelief that needs to take place, since not only did Jack not hear the portal opening, but he also apparently didn't hear the ghosts screaming when they flew out of it. However, while I would say this is a valid criticism to an extent, it's accomplishing two separate tasks of A, establishing the overall tone that the series maintains for the most part throughout, and B, setting Jack's character up as the oblivious dad, which is actually kind of good considering what else he just doesn't pick up on throughout the series.
Sam, Tucker, this is the Fenton thermos. It's supposed to trap ghosts, but since it doesn't work yet, it's just a thermos.
Okay, so he says it doesn't work. We already know it does work.
Yeah, that's the thing. How does he know that it doesn't work?
Because from our point of view, he hasn't actually tried it on a ghost because he hasn't been able to open the portal yet.
But he has.
Sure.
Like, the portal does... No, yeah, he does say that he hasn't gotten it to open yet, I guess, even though...
This motherfucker doesn't have any idea. It says, why is he even... It works, though. Does he not... I mean... Okay, so when Danny uses it, it shoots out the beam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it grabs the ghost, blah, blah, blah. Fucking Ghostbusters. If you're shooting it, you can... I'm pretty sure later in the show you see him miss. You have to, hit him with it. So he can easily just be like, oh, it shoots. They never tested it on a ghost, but it shoots the ghost capturing beam, whatever.
So I guess it's like the idea that it only actually works on ghosts, so he's tried it on something else and it didn't work, and so therefore it doesn't work, I guess.
It's also kind of interesting that the show is setting Danny up for some sort of payoff with the reveal of him transforming later, but if that was the intention, it probably would have benefited with a different opening that didn't immediately show us said transformation. Could be better, could be worse, but it's okay. There's definitely worse ways they could have presented it to us. Which brings us to the opening theme. I have consistently had this theme song stuck in my head for over a decade. To this day, I still find myself humming it absent-mindedly. I'm not sure why it stuck with me as long as it did, but I digress. The opening for Danny Phantom essentially acts as a mini origin episode. It very quickly tells the story of how Danny's parents made the ghost portal and it failed at its initial startup.
So it fucking sparked, and they're saying it's off. Then how did it spark in the first place?
Like I said, the only thing that I guess the whole idea that they had to actually switch that on first, and so the spark could have just been just a random thing of it trying to work, but then the other thing wasn't set, so it just didn't.
That's not how technology works.
I don't know.
I really repair computers. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there any way that could have possibly happened?
Something's literally broken. That's all I got.
Yeah.
This prompted Danny to explore the device before accidentally switching it on and getting struck with the ghost energy, as it were, that gave him his powers. The idea itself is pretty nifty and a decent way of avoiding an origin episode. Simultaneously, this allows someone to start at any point in the series without feeling lost. At least until they started doing overarching storylines, but, well. In this case, however, I think that Danny Phantom would have benefited with an origin episode. This story is riddled with holes and unanswered questions that could have made for a full episode. The initial question that arises is why the Fentons immediately gave up as soon as their portal didn't work the first time. These two were scientists, who were probably used to failed experiments on a regular basis. It would have been foolish for them to expect it to just work on their first try. An easy solution to this, had it been a full episode, could have been showing that Maddie and Jack examined the calculations and the design, finding finding nothing wrong with them and deciding to simply take a break from working on it. Who knows how many resources they poured into making this thing, so I have a hard time believing that they would just completely throw in the towel on it. However, that creates the problem that had they looked into it at all, they would have found that they simply had to turn the machine on, which puts a bit of a halt to the whole premise of the origin story. The whole reason Danny investigated it in the first place was implied to be because of how his parents were upset at its lack of functionality. On top of that, why exactly is the on-off switch placed inside the machine walls where it couldn't be safely accessed? This could have been passed off as a joke if Jack placed it there without thinking, but Maddie is implied to be a little bit more competent and therefore would probably realize that that's a terrible idea. And since Danny Phantom operates on a little bit more of a realistic foundation, at least a hell of a lot more than Butch's other cartoons did, I find it a little hard to believe that the on-off buttons were placed there with Maddie oblivious to it without some kind of explanation on why. The only thing that I can think of to defend it would be that it was a button that needed to be pressed prior to being plugged in, and it was the only thing they forgot to do before trying it out. But it is not portrayed in that light. It really just looks like the power button was placed in a spot that cannot be accessed without turning yourself into a horrific ghost-human hybrid. That also means that once the portal is on, it can never be turned off unless it's unplugged, which is a terrible design choice. That also means that, depending on how the panel is set up, should the ghost portal ever get unplugged, or if the Fentons lose power, does that then mean that someone has to go into the machine to turn it back on again? Also, on top of that, we never get to see what Jack and Maddie's reactions were to the ghost portal suddenly beginning to work. This could have been a hilarious and incredibly satisfying payoff to the work that they put into the thing. Wouldn't they be the least bit curious on why it randomly started working out of nowhere? A laboratory that advanced would have some cameras in it, I would think, especially considering what they're working on. Neither one of them thought to look back and see what changed to make their invention start working? Ah well. Maybe I'm looking into this too much. However, I would hold to the fact that an origin episode for a show like this would have been a welcome one. Not necessarily needed, but it could have been nice. Anyway, there's a secondary question that arises from this that's a tad bit on the darker side. In the earlier episodes of the series, the ghosts were implied to actually be human spirits. This is mostly prevalent in the Poindexter episode, but several undertones imply that all the ghosts that Danny fights are actually people who have died. The lunch lady, Skulker, Ember, that one loud and irritating one that the show turned into a joke, all people who have died one way or another and have essentially become lost souls. Little on the depressing side when you think about it, especially considering one of them is a small child. And what exactly does that mean for Danny? They say he's half ghost, but that's never actually explained in the series. Is there some truth that the accident with the portal killed him? I mean, probably not, because this is a children's cartoon, and after all, Nickelodeon would never make something that dark. This concept was eventually seemingly scrapped, and the ghosts became synonymous with monsters or otherworldly beings for the most part, which is honestly kind of a shame on multiple levels. For one, it could have been incredibly interesting to explore that idea a little further. Imagine if Danny knew someone who died in some shape or form and he ended up meeting him or her again as a villain later on. That could have been an incredible opportunity for some major character moments between the two. Yeah, I know, Nickelodeon cartoon, probably a slightly heavier concept for the target demographic, but honestly, the amount of interesting stories that they missed out on isn't necessarily the problem. It's the shameless contradictions and consistency that they just chose to ignore. Ghosts like Skulker, Ember, the Box Ghost, the Lunch Lady, and so on seem as though they came from a completely different place, as opposed to ghosts that showed up later in the series like Nocturne, Clockwork, Vortex, and Undergrowth. To give an example of what I mean by this, the Lunch Lady can easily be inferred to have previously been an elderly cafeteria worker that was very set in her ways and wanted to keep the menu unaltered. We don't really go into how she died, but we don't have to. All the information we need on her character is there, and it seems fairly safe to assume who she was when she was alive. Not only this, but other characters such as Desiree and Poindexter are fully established to have formerly been living people. I have also heard here and there throughout the vines of the internet that Ember was a girl from the 70s who was killed in a house fire after having her heart broken. The main evidence that supports this is the lyrics to her song Remember, as well as the mannerisms she uses during her interactions with Danny. However, beyond this, the information is never explicitly stated, as was was the case with Desiree and Poindexter, so I'm comfortable conceding that we don't have a solid enough backstory for Ember to form an argument. But the thing is we really don't need one. Obviously, it's pretty widely accepted, at least in this point in the production, that the ghosts were once living people. Now let's skip ahead in the series a little bit and think about Undergrowth. He's essentially the poison ivy of this universe, and his intentions are pretty much identical. Wipe out humanity and put plants there in its place. However, picturing Undergrowth and everything we know about him, can we actually piece together a previous life that this thing had? Not saying it's impossible, but it's strange that a ghost with that specific of a gimmick doesn't have any kind of backstory. The same goes for Clockwork, and oh boy, the things we're going to talk about when we get to Clockwork. But all that aside, what exactly did he do in his life that made him the official keeper of time in the Ghost Zone? Am I stretching? Yeah, maybe. But then there's also this.
And in Danny Fenton, we had a rule. We were writing the show that none of the ghosts would be dead people.
Locker 724 was originally owned by a Poindexter back in the 50s. He got stuffed into his locker so many times, it's believed his spirit still inhabits it to this very day.
We never wanted to be the ghost of a dead person.
Apparently, Desiree was a harem girl who had been promised her heart's desire. She died of a broken heart and old age. After that, her spirit roamed, granting people's deepest desires.
We wanted the ghosts to be creatures from another dimension that couldn't take the shape of a human, or could take the shape of something, but they would never be a deceased person's spirit.
Previously home to the legendary Wisconsin Dairy King.
Gosh and golly, it looks like you could use a speck of help there, don't you know?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Somebody's contradicting their story. I know you wanted to go back on the whole "these people are dead" concept, but it's a little late for that, Butch. There are several characters that you've created that are part of two clashing ideas. One being that the Ghost Zone is just a separate dimension that has monsters in it, and the other being that it's the literal form of the afterlife.
Also, interesting thing, so I was watching just random Butch Hartman videos the other day. It is confirmed the ghosts are not ghosts. They're just otherworldly beings. So it's straight up retconning from Butch Hartman himself, just saying that they're just not dead people.
Don't call them ghosts then.
Don't give backstories to certain ones that actually contradict that.
Yeah.
Poindexter was a kid in the 50s that was bullied severely to the point where his spirit is still haunting the locker he used to own. And Desiree was a girl from even further back who died of a broken heart from being banished from her kingdom. Simultaneously, these aren't dead people. Whatever you say, man. What a way to strip your characters of any meaningful backstories. What a way to strip any kind of mystique from your world. See this guy, the box ghost? You wonder what he did in life. Was he actually a warehouse employee that died in some kind of work-related incident? Did he have a family? Did he have friends? No, guess not. He just likes warehouse employees and dresses like them because of it.
And again, we don't do dead guys or girls on Danny Fenton. These are not the ghosts of dead people. He's just a box ghost. He's a ghost that likes boxes and dresses like the workers down in the dock. So he's a ghost who likes to dress like the workers of the places that he hangs out. So that's who the box ghost is.
Why are you even calling them ghosts if that's not what they are, my man? As this is how we are opening the series, I will be treating the remaining episodes as if all the ghosts are souls of people past, regardless of what the creator says after the fact. I don't know about you, but I think we're going to be hitting a couple problems going forward. Anyway, rant over. The show kicks on and we get our introduction to Maddie and Jazz. There isn't really much to say about Maddie other than she shares Jack's obsession with ghosts. They show a device that supposedly tracks ghosts through satellites. Not exactly sure how that works, but it does, so yeah. Not sure why they never used it again in any other episode.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that they have access to satellites?
How does that work anyway? Like, say they do have access to the satellites. How do the satellites track the ghosts?
With the ghost tracker, tracks the ghost. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if I had to try to explain it, I'd say that because ghosts use like quote unquote ectoplasm or whatever the fuck, like ghost energy, whatever the fuck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that has some sort of frequency you could attune an object to detect. However, they haven't seen a ghost since they've opened the portal because they're, kind of incompetent. So how could they attune that to ghost energy when they don't have any?
I mean, they've probably had access to ectoplasm, haven't they? Like, maybe not necessarily ghosts. I don't know.
But saying it's kind of a maybe. Like, I could say that they could have it. I could understand that they do have it. I'm just saying, like, it's not shown to me that they do, and they're shown to be grossly incompetent about how to do things.
Yeah, so it also kind of just depends on how much they've actually interacted with the ghost portal, because I guess they could probably have gotten some ectoplasm through there. But
Jack said it just releases ghosts whether they wants to or not. I mean, he can't even shut it, so can he even open it on if he wants to? Oh, I said, what do you think he'd be jumping in there and being like, ghost hunting, right?
See, that's the thing, is like how he's never actually, in the entire time that we've known him in the show, he never sends a drone or anything into the ghost zone. He builds like the ship thing, the Fenton portal ship thing that they use all the time, but he never actually uses it. Danny uses it all the time to explore the ghost zone, but Jack never does.
Yeah.
And that's almost been like a running gag throughout the show, that Jack just never went into the ghost zone, so he never knew what it was like in there, which was kind of a shame.
But the main focus of the scene is primarily on Jazz. We're shown that Jazz is incredibly overprotective of Danny, and she believes that her parents are corrupting him with their ghost hunting, which is kind of ironic when you think about it, because she's not entirely wrong.
Okay, well, this is just a really random thing to all of a sudden be just yelling out in the middle of this conversation. You don't need to just talk to your parents. You need insert thing I think here. It's like, wait, hold on. Your brother was about to say something that sounds important, and you're just interrupting the shit out of him. What you need to do is shut the fuck up.
Well, yeah, and I guess because they're flanderizing these characters to try and show you who they are right from the get-go.
I mean, which is fine. It's not a bad thing. I'm just something I noticed. Like sometimes by doing so. Sometimes you make the characters do strange interactions that just don't make it. Look how sad Danny looks in this part.
He really does.
Also, I want to point out that later in this episode, they think Jazz is possessed, right? I'm pretty sure that's her part of this, small part of this episode, is that they're tracking her thinking she's a ghost. They are super paranoid ghost hunters. That thing just led them right to Danny, and they didn't immediately assume this boy possessed. Yet later they do that with Jazz.
Yeah, right. Well, see, that's the thing. I don't even know that they thought she was possessed. I think they just thought she was straight up a ghost.
I just don't understand why they don't think that about Danny right now when the thing's literally saying, yo, this boy...
I mean, yeah, I have no idea.
It just doesn't... I mean, if you want to go with the overly paranoid, almost mentally retarded ghost hunters, like, if they're going to do that, just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't say I have an answer for that. I don't know why they wouldn't suspect Danny here at all.
Jack looks so confused. Just look at him. He's just like, this bitch talking.
Come, you abused, unwanted wretch. I'll drive you to school.
Why did you call him unwanted? His parents don't not want him. Literally just like, don't worry, I'll protect you. I know everybody doesn't want you and you have no friends, but don't worry. He literally has like two best friends, and you like him and his parents like him. What do you say?
Why would they then take that as she's driving him to school and she never does that, so therefore ghost. But then the machine that they're saying they're looking at that's straight up saying that Danny is a ghost isn't actually registering anything on them. Which it's like, whatever, because it's like it's playing into the whole clueless parents joke, but damn.
Do they trust their machine or not? They built it.
Supposed to use the satellites to track the ghost, man.
2 more days and it's done. And then Jack's like, wait, it's done? Even though we just heard that it's not. And then it works. So is it done or not?
Right.
I'm just saying.
Initially, one may wonder why Danny isn't just telling his parents about the accident and what happened. At this point, he isn't trying to be a superhero, and in the next scene, he even says this.
If my dad can invent something that accidentally made me half ghost, why can't he invent something that turns me back to normal?
They can't really do that if you don't tell them about it, Danny. So for a moment, I'll admit that I was raising an eyebrow that Danny was hiding it for no reason until these lines of dialogue were said.
Huh. That's weird. Jasmine never offers to drive Danny to school.
That can only mean one thing. That's not our daughter. That's a ghost. Danny, no, it's a trap!
Okay, yeah, that might actually have something to do with the secrecy. Whether this was intentional or not, I would say this is actually a pretty well-written and non-contrived way to inform the audience on why Danny isn't just saying anything to them. There's no clear answer on whether or not they'll believe him or just assume he's an imposter and then try to capture him. Doesn't really shine that amazingly on them as parents, mind you, but on the flip side, it is an incredible miracle from God that literally nobody has noticed Danny's powers yet. He barely has control over them at all. He's regularly sinking into the ground and randomly turning invisible, and yet nobody notices. It's almost played off as a joke, but at the same time, not.
Okay, what's going
So
on?
I just want to point out, so he just walked it through that vending machine, right?
Right.
How did he not sink to the floor when he did that? Because he was intangible. And not only that, that means, okay, so in most of the ways he's arranged, it means he's literally walking so close to the wall. This motherfucker is just like, "Wait, what are you doing?"
I almost kind of took that as he did it on purpose, but I don't. I don't
he
know.
didn't. He has no. He's already been stated to have no control, barely no control in the last like 3 seconds.
Well, he
that was
doesn't
on
have.
purpose.
He doesn't have no. He has some level of control. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to probably go ghost or do basically anything. This is the fact that I have to try to think of the right way to describe it. Like, he just randomly turns intangible when he doesn't want to, but he can still turn intangible when he wants to, I think is the...
But why would he do that at school, though?
True.
Just don't walk to the vending machine, retard. What are you doing?
Just go around it, Danny. Why?
And don't get me wrong, it's good to see him struggling with them. This is actually something I remember from my original viewings, where we see Danny slowly becoming more and more proficient with the powers as time goes on. Maybe I'm just too used to the whole concept of character development being thrown out the window or poorly executed to the point of laughter, as we've seen in recent television and film. But seeing this is actually amazing and an incredible breath of fresh air. However, my original point still stands that it is beyond convenient that he goes through these trials at completely random intervals through the day, and never once does anyone see it. Anyway, the main conflict of the episode is brought to the forefront with some rather clunky dialogue. It's a little strange because it happens in the same scene where Danny is trying to ask his friends for advice on whether or not he should tell his parents about everything, and Sam out of nowhere brings up that she's an ultra-recyclable vegetarian, which I am not going to repeat every time I talk about it, so I'm going to call it veganism, because that's essentially what it is. Tucker brings up that he eats meat, and this is very strange because the transition between these two conversations is so abrupt that you kind of wonder why Danny is confiding in them at all. I'm sorry, Sam, but we have slightly more pressing matters than what your dietary preferences are. Danny is kind of asking you about something that's going to affect his life forever, and your advice turns into a monologue about why you don't eat meat. This is followed by Tucker showing off that he can tell what kind of meat Danny had for dinner last night. This is foreshadowing for Tucker being able to find the ghost later. That, and it's just the running gag for this episode, I guess. This all leads up to Sam informing Tucker that she's convinced the school board to change the cafeteria menu to a vegan-only one, much to Tucker's horror. This is then followed by a scene at the cafeteria where Tucker proceeds to have a meltdown over it. That entire conversation could have been cut. Kind of makes Sam and Tucker look like assholes a little bit, as they immediately resort to talking about themselves while Danny is legitimately trying to come up with a solution for losing half of his humanity. We could have had the same narrative effect by cutting to the next scene and showing Danny and Tucker shocked by the change and confronting Sam on it, who informs them of what happened. As it stands, it's a little weird, and the lines are kind of contrived. Just contrived enough to set the stage for what this episode is going to be about. This is a problem that stands out very hard in this episode. Sam is heavily portrayed to be an unreasonable and insane veganism activist, while Tucker is shown to be the same in the opposite direction. This is due to the writers trying to very quickly establish what kind of character Sam is in the 20-minute span that they have. So instead of starting off soft, they turn her personality up to 11 and really push the whole vegan thing, to the point where I begin wondering why Danny and Tucker are even hanging out with her. It almost seemed like they wanted to have Sam and Tucker be the two extremes, with Danny laying somewhere in the middle, but they didn't even do that, as Danny sides with Tucker immediately, further showing how insane Sam's actually being.
Yeah, thanks again for making us eat garbage, Sam.
It's not garbage. It's recyclable organic matter.
It's garbage.
Hold on. Meat is also organic matter. And can also be used for compost and is technically considered something that can be recyclable. So check your vegan privilege, you stupid bitch.
Sam doesn't put up good arguments for veganism in this episode. This whole plot line was, I think it's probably one of the most forced plot lines in the entire show. Like, it gets pretty bad in season 3, but this episode, like, man, this was so ham-fisted.
You said ham. It's against vegans.
I did.
Hey, I'm vegan.
She doesn't even present any good arguments as to why she is that way, and the ones she does put forth are the weakest excuses for being a vegan that I have ever heard.
We don't need meat. That's fact. Ultra-recyclable vegetarians are always ready to protest. And because we don't have to waste time cooking our food, we can move even faster.
If you had to think of a reason to argue for veganism, do you think that you could do better than Sam is doing right now?
Probably. I wouldn't, because that required me to turn my brain off and not and be a vegan, but I'm not doing that. Also, we don't have to cook our food. It's like, okay, yeah, but like, does everybody actually eat their vegetables raw? Because they don't, and some vegetables can't be eaten raw. Such as if you're going to eat things like potatoes and stuff, you can't just eat those raw because they're bad for you that way, you fucking idiot.
Nah.
Also, now they're going to put Danny in the middle for no reason. It's like, you just have one of us. It's like, there's a ghost happening right now. We have actual problems. Your guys' problem is stupid. What the?
There's so many more important things that are going on right now.
Look at Danny's face. It appeared to me, it's like, well, this is stupid. We have something more important to do. That's his face right now.
This is like, this all started from him saying to them, like, I need to confide in you about the fact that I don't know what to do about this accident that has horribly mutated me into this disgusting creature. And also there's a ghost trying to kill us. And this is this is what you're doing. This is what we're dealing with.
I know that this show isn't exactly trying to explore the vegetarians versus meat eaters argument to any logical degree. But the fact that Sam can't even remotely defend her position at all does not make her a very strong character. I believe this is a problem based on how many characters they're trying to introduce all at once. We have Danny, Sam, Tucker, Jack, Maddie, Jazz, Mr. Lancer, Dash, and the lunch lady all thrown in together at once, and we're set with the problems of establishing who they are in a length of time shorter than most people spend eating their lunch. There's a very obvious solution to this, and it's called slow rolling your introductions. We didn't need to be introduced to Dash this episode, and we didn't need to be introduced to Lancer this episode. The time we spent with Dash and Lancer could have been devoted to deepening Danny, Sam, and Tucker instead of flanderizing them to their most extreme right out the gate to get across what kind of people they are. Not only is that a poor way to establish your characters, but it creates contradictions later on when your characters are no longer that extreme about their beliefs. Now here's the interesting thing. This episode also includes an entire subplot that involves Jack and Maddie trying to capture Jazz because they think she's a ghost.
Why did they smoke grenade her? If it's a ghost, that's not going to do probably anything. It's just going to go to the floor. Also, I don't recall the vacuum looking like that when they first showed it in the early part of the episode.
Did it look different? I actually don't know.
When Jazz gets home, we suck the ghost out of her with a Fenton extractor.
Okay, so you saw how that looked.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Did it have a
Unless it gets in your hair,
like an actual like bag part now?
It just isn't built the same at all. It's a hose now. It was not like that a second ago.
What the hell? I didn't even notice that. Did they, like, rebuild it or something? Why would they do that?
After my first viewing, I was of the position that this portion contributed nothing to the overall story and was just useless banter between these three characters. After my second and third watch through, however, I think that there's a little bit more to talk about. The story comes to a head with Jack concluding that he's been wasting his life hunting ghosts because they don't exist. After this, he sees Danny phase through the ground in front of him, assuring him that ghosts do in fact exist and his life's work hasn't been for nothing. It's a good sentiment and a good piece of character development, but not one that I think was executed very well, which again comes down to the time constraints. Jack concludes that ghosts don't exist based on what his 16-year-old daughter says to him. He's been doing this his entire life, with his partner supporting and helping him through all of it. There is no way in hell he would throw it all away because of one angry outburst from his daughter. This is something that would have been better to stretch out over multiple episodes. Jack's failures and redemptions are concepts that are explored to a better degree in other episodes, but here it's very glazed over and underdeveloped. Not only this, but Maddie is involved in this situation as well, and we don't even hear her thoughts of Jack's immediate flip in beliefs. If anything, she would have been the one to tell him that ghosts do exist, but she doesn't say anything, nor does she even really react to Danny Phantom's sudden appearance in front of them. I could believe this scene a little bit more if Maddie weren't involved, but she was. On top of that, we only get this development over 2 scenes. If Jack's belief in ghosts were this flimsy, he would have stopped inventing ghost hunting technology the first time someone said it wouldn't work. All in all, while I will concede that this subplot does in fact serve a purpose to the narrative, its portrayal could have been vastly improved upon. If these events would have unfolded through the course of the first 3 or 4 episodes, with Jack continuously failing on every level and slowly becoming more and more discouraged each time, then the scene of him deciding that he's throwing in the towel, as it were, would have been incredibly more impactful and meaningful, especially when he sees a ghost for the first time and realizes that he was right. This is a perfect example of a good theme and good character development being botched in execution.
Hold on. So they have a Fenton grappler, which is used to capture ghosts, and then she's like, why does he just phase through it? It's like, why'd you make something... Then what the fuck is the point of the grappler, then, if you could just do that? Why even make it? Are you a fucking idiot?
So if that's the case, do all of your inventions have that problem? So can ghosts just phase through the Fenton thermos? Is that why you think it doesn't work?
Which we know it does. They actually, you know that they can't.
Yeah, we know they can't. So they just have certain inventions that they made it so, or they just haven't figured out how to. Some inventions they can phase through, and some they can't. So, why are they making them like that? Why are only some of them designed effectively?
I don't know.
Anyway, we're introduced to Dash next and how useless of a character he is in this episode. He's established to be generic, angry bully stereotype who's mad at Danny because Sam changed the menu.
These are the best years of my life. After high school, it's all downhill for me. How am I supposed to enjoy my glory days eating mud?
Actually, it's topsoil.
Does Sam actually eat this?
I don't think we ever actually see her eat it.
Yeah.
Also, she says it's not mud, it's topsoil. Do I need to explain to you what mud is, Sam? Because any type of soil can be mud, you fucking idiot. Stop being so pretentious.
Sam is insufferable in this episode. She really is. It's insane. And next
also,
episode, she gets just completely 180 and she's better. It's I don't understand what was going on with her in this episode.
A little dark that Dash is like, after high school, my life's going to suck. And I'm just like, you don't need to be telling kids this. They got to figure this out on their own. Relax. Hold on.
Right.
He's about to force Danny to eat a plate of mud when we see an interesting power of Danny's go off. His ghost sense. Now, we will be talking about this a little more later, but it won't be for about 45 more weeks. So I'll give a brief summary. The ghost sense is obviously inspired from the idea that the air becomes colder when a ghost is close by. The interesting thing to note is that while it's obviously an effect of Danny's powers that is shared by no one else, the ghosts themselves don't even seem to have it. In fact, weirdly enough, only humans with ghost powers seem to have it. This is, of course, with the exception of fully evil ghost Danny, so yeah, I'm not really exactly sure what the rules are for it. It's possible that the other ghosts have it as well, and we simply haven't seen it, but we receive information later on to imply that it isn't even related to the presence of a ghost. But that's a can of worms I don't really feel like opening right now. As it currently stands, the ghost sense is simply that. Danny Phantom's version of the Spidey sense, and he uses it as such. So Danny starts a food fight to go investigate the ghost that's appeared in the cafeteria. After Tucker rats out Sam to the lunch lady about her veganizing the menu and the lunch lady gets all mad about it, we get our first transformation scene from Danny Fenton to Phantom. It's kind of cool, I suppose. Like I said, the payoff would have been much better if we hadn't have seen it in the opening credits, but it's fine. Strangely, the lunch lady isn't all that surprised to see Danny do that for whatever reason. We know it isn't common for people to do that, and Poindexter even acts shocked when he sees it and makes a comment about how he's a hot topic in the ghost zone. So the lunch lady not reacting to this is fairly strange, albeit easy to overlook. On another note, I was really happy to see Danny actually have no clue on how to confront the lunch lady at first. It shows his inexperience, and once he gets to the point of actually using his powers to protect his friends, he fully embraces the whole superhero thing, which is probably what any 14-year-old would do in that situation. It's kind of a shame we didn't focus more on this as opposed to Sam and Tucker fighting the whole time. I would wager it would have been infinitely more interesting for a lot of people had we focused more on Danny's struggles and thoughts regarding his powers and coming to terms with them, instead of watching a vegan and a meat eater bickering at each other. We're shown that Danny is essentially trying to ignore his powers and continue living his day-to-day life. Being a superhero hasn't even crossed his mind, it would seem. At the moment, this is due to him presumably not wanting his parents to dissect him, and, as is the more concrete evidence as it's something he actually says, he doesn't want to become the school freak show. This is all well and good and works fairly well for what it is. However, it would have been nice to have a little extra time to explore that a bit further. Show Danny actively avoiding using his powers. Maybe have a scene where he's trying to do something that would be easier if he were to go ghost, yet he refuses to do so. It doesn't have to be anything big. Maybe he just drops a coin down an air vent when he's trying to get a soda and ultimately decides to go without the soda instead of turning intangible to reach down to get the coin. Just something like that. Something small that would really maximize the payoff later when he's forced to use his powers to protect his friends. This then making him realize that he can use these powers to protect others and starting the proverbial hero's journey. We don't really get any of this, and while I agree that pretty much any 14-year-old in his position would probably immediately decide to be a superhero, it still would have been nice to see a little bit more of that progression. As it stands, the episode starts with Danny using his powers to save his friends. Then he doesn't want to use them because they make him a freak. Then he uses them to save his friends again. A few fight scenes happen, and by the end of it, he's decided he's going to use his powers more often. I don't want to sell it short, because it isn't too much of a stretch to say that that would be enough. He did save his friends after all, and that would be a pretty big confidence booster for anyone. So the fight goes on, and the lunch lady brings a bunch of ovens to life to attack our heroes. That's all fine and good, but it kind of raises a question or two about her abilities. We don't ever get a clear rule set on what she can or cannot do, but it's fairly obvious that she has powers over food preparation, I suppose. Which is pretty vague, honestly. It kind of makes me wonder what the extent of her abilities actually are.
Okay, so her powers, as I'm meant to understand, is she controls lunch. So I've seen animation of objects, pyrokinesis, and telekinesis.
Yep.
If I can attribute anything to lunch, does she all of a sudden gain the power to do it?
Yeah. I guess it's whatever she attributes to lunch, question mark?
As soon as she could change her... That means that she could just change her perception to anything that has to do with lunch and then use it. That's retarded.
Yeah, slightly. Yeah, that's kind of dumb.
Anyway, Sam gets captured by Grandma, and Danny and Tucker get captured by Mr. Lancer. Overall, these scenes aren't terribly important to the story, other than showing that Danny is going to be in a lot of trouble and such when this is over, as he uses his powers to escape Lancer's office when he's not around. This upsets him quite a bit, and I found myself wondering if there was ever a scene in this show where Lancer wasn't angry about something. I don't understand how this man hasn't had a stroke yet. We get another fight scene, and it's cool. It's pretty fun. Really makes me realize how terrifying and disturbing of a villain the lunch lady could be if this show wasn't made for young children. Danny here bounces across the floor while he's intangible, so that's kind of dumb. Sam is saved, and after we get another scene of her and Tucker fighting with each other over what they eat, which is so incredibly inappropriate right now given the context of what's happening. Remember, this is technically Sam's fault, and instead of conceding and saying that maybe the menu should be changed back considering there's an angry spirit who's throwing a temper tantrum about it and is quite easily putting other people's lives in danger by doing so, she instead doubles down on it by screaming this.
You want to change that menu back? You're gonna have to go through me to do it!
Forcing other people to eat what she eats is more important than other people's lives. What a great person Sam is.
Sam is like...
Two things.
She is like 100% the villain this episode.
Yeah, because this is her fault, and she literally has, oh, we'll just put the meat back, it'll fix the situation. She's just like, no! Vegetables!
Hey, I'm vegan. Can you give me this medal?
So the next day, we have this nonsense going on.
What do we want? We want it. No! Veggies now! Veggies forever!
It's just the school lunch.
And Sam and Tucker proceed to come up to Danny and put him directly in the middle of their hollow, stupid fight. Seems incredibly appropriate considering there's still an angry spirit around that's actively trying to kill them. And oh, look at that! Tucker made things 100 times worse for everyone by bringing meat to the protest. I suppose it was worth it to get his point across. But here's the thing. None of this conflict is actually solved. Tucker and Sam never actually make up. We end the episode wondering why they're friends at all. In terms of a conclusion to their fight, we get this line.
Guys, time to make up. Now!
And then it's action for the rest of the episode. It's obvious that the whole vegan meat thing was just an underlay for the antagonist, which kind of makes me wonder if the only reason Sam was made vegan was so that we could have this story. In terms of writing, it's fairly poor, especially considering it's never actually wrapped up. Tucker and Sam simply stop fighting once the lunch lady is defeated, and we're left to assume that the menu just changed back after all was said and done. If they were going for a moral of the story type of deal, I'm not exactly sure what it was. Don't be vegan, I guess.
So you gonna give me this medal or what? Because I'm vegan.
But let's backtrack a little bit, because we aren't quite done talking about things. So during all this, Jazz is trying to play psychologist with someone directly next to everyone panicking and running away. You'd think that they, or Danny's parents for that matter, would wonder what everyone is running away from, but I suppose not. Makes you wonder why that scene even took place there to begin with. Wouldn't it have been easier just to have them be inside the school or basically anywhere else? Why would they make this problem for themselves? Well, I'll tell you why. It's so that Jack can throw the Fenton thermos over his shoulder and into Danny's face so that he can beat the lunch lady. Ah, a plot point depending on something dumb. Where have we seen this before? I'm mostly okay with this, I guess, because it's an extension of the oblivious parents joke. But Jazz is another story. Ignoring the fact that she is literally looking in the direction that the thermos has been thrown and therefore would see the meat ghosts carrying her brother through the air, Jazz is supposed to be a little bit more intelligent of a character than her parents are. We're meant to take her a little bit more seriously, so watching her being completely oblivious to the fight going on in front of her is a little weird. I'm not gonna lie though, the joke that comes after got a chuckle out of me. So Danny gets the thermos and ultimately beats the lunch lady. He's caught afterwards by Mr. Lancer, who punishes him, Sam, and Tucker by making them pick up all the exploded meat around the schoolyard.
Why is Sam in trouble? What did she do?
What did any of them do at this point? I mean, granted, Tucker and Danny left detention, but like this whole thing, like what? Why isn't Dash helping if Sam has to help? I don't understand.
Well,
whatever.
Yeah, because yeah.
The episode ends with Danny making more work for himself and his friends by turning a dumpster intangible and burying Dash in a bunch of meat that they presumably had already taken care of. So, good one there, Danny. Overall, the episode was pretty mediocre to bad, honestly. Especially for a series premiere. The show was definitely running on premise alone at this point and probably would have infinitely benefited from having a two-parter as its premiere instead of just one. I mean, it's not like there were any episodes that came after this that were actually awful and could have been taken out entirely for it or something. I know this 20-minute format is going to be a hindrance for the show for the remaining episodes as well, but at least for this one, they certainly did not take advantage of the time that they had.
How do you think that if you had to rate that, where would you put that, you think?
Are we talking, how are we rating this? Are we talking like a 1 out of 10? Or what, like 1 to 10? I don't know. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's any higher than a 6.
It's
maybe a 7. It's
of...
because it had a lot of good points where it's like, it's only working with 20 minutes. It's establishing a reasonable amount of stuff, but also on the other hand, there's a lot of inconsistencies and things that just kind of just get glossed over because they put too much into the episode, in my opinion, to start it off, because they tried to introduce so many people and all these concepts without taking enough time to flesh. You see, if they were like how they do with a lot of newer shows where they're like 45 minutes, I think they'd be way better. They could have extended that entire episode into 45 minutes and had a lot more time to develop a lot more, and I think it'd be better.
But yeah, because like the TV movies, well, for the most part, like Phantom Planet are pretty.
And Ghost King too.
Yeah, Rainstorm was a really good one, and that's because they was like at that 45-minute mark, and so they had more time to actually make things happen, and it felt like the whole show should have been a 45-minute show. Honestly, they would have been able to do so much more with it then. But they really did, like, just the introducing Dash and Lancer, I think, they could have survived keeping Jack, Maddie, and Jazz in and having that whole subplot, but I think that having that whole thing with Lancer and Dash thrown in just because Danny and Tucker have to get in trouble because superhero balancing his life and in his school life and his superhero life cliche, that really brought the episode down, I think, because that was just time that they could have spent actually developing the characters a little bit more.
You just introduce this whole Dash and him and Lancer concept next episode. You don't have to do too much at once.
That's the thing. Is like imagine we could have had this in the next episode with Paulina, because that was where they introduced her, and then that would have made a little bit more sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Sam and Tucker's arguments were forced and unnecessary, and nothing was even resolved by the end of it. Their characters suffered as a result, as did Danny's, as his hesitation to his ghost powers could have been explored a lot further than it actually was. The scenes with Mr. Lancer and Dash also contributed nothing to the story other than providing us with a couple extra jokes. I found them funny, not gonna lie on that one, but especially considering it was a series premiere, more time absolutely should have been spent on making Danny's character deeper.
I mean, I'm sure you're already saying, I wish there was just an origin episode.
Yeah, an origin episode would have been so much better. They could have actually, it just would have been better. Which is funny because we actually get that later on. Remember?
Yes, when he gets back and gets the D.
Yeah, the pseudo origin episode.
Yeah, I'm not a super big fan of that episode, honestly.
It has some problems. It's a Desiree episode, so it has problems.
Yeah, we'll get to that in the next, 2 episodes from now.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, I would say that the strongest character in this episode was actually the lunch lady. She had the clearest and most defined motivations compared to everyone else. She definitely took her desire to provide nutrients to everyone a little to the far side, but we as an audience could at least understand why she's upset, especially if she were an elderly woman who didn't particularly care for change, as tends to be the norm for elderly people. So, while I'd say that we're off to a rocky start, it's still a premise that can easily be built off into something great. It's a fairly unique superhero story in terms of its execution, and the setting is a very interesting one, at least from my perspective. I hope that you enjoyed my critique and found it informative, and I'll see you next time for episode 2.
Also, I'll point out this dude in the front row here, next to the curly-haired person. Like, he's like in the center. His head is literally like, and neck is like up.
His entire head is a neck.
It completely doesn't matter, but I just noticed. I'm like, wow, look at this dude.
Yeah, man.
His hair looks like a pineapple as a triangle.
Oh.